and good morning. Welcome to the third episode of The Springer Show. I am your host, Brian Springer. Today, sadly, my co-host will not be joining us. Mr. Bobby is getting married. Why don't we just go ahead and take a minute and send our condolences to Bobby. What a beautiful song. But in all seriousness, congratulations to Bobby on getting married today. Can't wait to have him back next week and hear all about the exciting fun that he's having. Today, joining us, we do have a special guest co-host. Her name is Michelle. It's just Michelle. Say hello, Michelle.
Hello, glad to be here today.
Awesome. We are happy to have you. So usually we just kind of roll right into the topic at hand, but before we do that, we do like to talk about coffee. Now, Michelle, are you a coffee drinker?
I am actually, I do quite love it.
You happen to have any coffee this morning?
I do. Today is actually Cafe Bustelo, I believe it's called. I don't know how to pronounce it, but most people consider it jet fuel, which I particularly like.
Jet fuel. So I guess it really just gets you going in the morning, or
And it does until you crash.
sounds like energy drink in a coffee form.
Gotta love it.
So I don't have anything special today, just some Maxwell House basic roast, a little French vanilla, creamer in there for pizzazz. Nothing crazy like Bobby likes to drink, but it's enough to wake me up and get me going in the morning. So I guess we've got that going for us.
And good to the last drop, right?
Yeah, is that Maxwell House? Or, yeah, yes, it is. Mm-hmm.
It's definitely not the best part of waking up.
No, I believe that would be Folgers. Anyway, today is January 11th, 2025. Apparently, it's National Milk Day. For whatever reason, we're celebrating milk today. Yay.
Well, that's awesome.
I guess so. So make sure you drink your milk. Does a body good.
But are we celebrating all kinds of milk? Are we almond milk or is it just cow milk?
Now, hold on. Hold on. There is no such thing as almond milk. I will fight you tooth and nail on this.
Not according to the label.
Well, I mean, you could just slap a label on anything and say it's milk.
That's true. That is true. So I guess that answers my question. And according to you, it is just cow milk day today.
Yes, according to me, anyway. But I didn't make the day up, so I don't know what kind of milk they're celebrating. I would like to assume that when they made this day, there was no such thing as milk from nuts.
See your point. Technically, it probably should be called almond juice.
Juice.
That
Yeah,
doesn't sound as appeasing, though.
no, it doesn't. First of all, almond milk to me, I'm of the mindset, show me the teat. Where are you getting the milk from?
I get you.
In a previous episode, when Bobby and I were talking about his marriage, he mentioned that he was going to have the congregation throw rice when they exited the church. And I had I guess a question as to whether that was legal or not, because I had heard a while back that it was not legal. So I kind of looked it up and wanted to answer that question before we went any further. First, apparently, rice is thrown at weddings. It's an ancient tradition that symbolizes fertility, prosperity, and good fortune. It's supposed to have originated with the ancient Romans who showered newly married couples with wheat.
Hmm.
I don't know why wheat, but apparently over time, wheat was replaced with rice, which is also considered a symbol of fruitfulness. I didn't know that.
No.
But looking it up, it is not illegal to throw rice at weddings in the United States. However, many wedding venues do have strict rules against it because of the difficulty of cleaning up the loose grains of rice, guests slipping and falling on the rice. and it can be harmful to birds, and that's what I had heard.
Yeah, I'd heard that one too.
Mhm. But now I had heard, and it's probably sort of a mix of a wives' tale, the birds eat the dry rice, it soaks up the fluid in their stomach, and boom, they just explode.
Yeah, that is exactly what I heard.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm just imagining a bird just flying through the air and explodes and feathers going everywhere. So I don't think that's probably happening. I don't know.
No, but when I got married, I used, bird seed. So, I'm like,
Bird.
well, if they're gonna eat it, let's throw something they're supposed to like.
You know, I've heard of people doing that, and like I mentioned to Bobby, I've also heard of people using bubbles. Uh,
Yeah.
so a lot of different things other than rice.
I guess the
But
bubbles would be the easiest no cleanup thing to go with.
sure, yeah. Well, I mean, if you had an area where there were a lot of birds throughout your bird seed, I guess they would pick that up and eat it for you. Bird seed, bubbles, just no rice apparently, but it is not illegal to do. That's
Okay.
great to know.
And from my understanding, you and Bobby are pretty far away statewide wise currently, correct?
Correct. I am in North Carolina, and he is in New York.
Because when his new wife hears you play tap celebrating his marriage, you might have had some problems coming your way. So,
Maybe, but I'm sure she probably understands the male perspective here. I can't say anything bad about marriage. I've been married myself. Unfortunately, it just didn't work out. But I currently have a girlfriend. We are engaged. Um, so marriage isn't a bad thing as long as you find the right person. But I don't like the fact that marriage seems to be disposable this day and
mhm.
age. You know, whereas with our grandparents and their grandparents and so forth, when you got married, it was one time and you made it work. You know, whether you wanted to beat the hell out of each other or didn't, you made it work. You pushed through the bad times. And that's why you hear, of these older couples being together 50, 60, 70 years. Like just as soon as they were legally allowed to get married, they did. And that's something to strive for. But this day and age, people get married and the first argument, it's, well, I want a divorce. Or the first sign of rough waters, I want a divorce. And now they're going through 3 and 4 different marriages. To me, you're losing the sanctity of marriage, whereas marriage, in my eyes, is between you, uh, your spouse, and your gods, whatever you choose to believe. I don't like the government involvement in it. I don't think that you should have to have a license to get married, pay a fee. It's supposed to just be a religious coming together of two people anyway.
Mhm. So, the last I heard, like, the divorce rate was up past 50%. It's like 60%. I can't quote that because I didn't look it up. But now do you think where you said some people are on their 3rd or 4th marriages, do you think maybe the number's not really as high as we think it is because it's 1 or 2 people contributing a lot more to the percentage rather than the actual marriages? Do you get what I'm saying?
So are you thinking that with these statistics, they're actually looking at the repeat of marriages? Say if you have a group of 10 people over here who married and divorced one time, 10 people over here who married and divorced 3 or 4 times, they're counting each marriage and divorce instead of as a whole, all 20 people being married and divorced one time?
I mean, statistically wise, that makes sense. So maybe the numbers aren't as high as we actually think they are per people?
Um, maybe. I really don't know. I haven't done those kind of studies, and I'm hoping the numbers aren't as high as they are in my head with people getting married and divorced 3, 4, however many times. Maybe that's just 1 in every 10, 1 in every 20 couples. I don't know. I certainly hope it's not that high. But even just one time, getting divorced, I know the Catholic Church looks down upon it. The church that Bobby attends, he and his future wife, they look down upon it. And there's many churches, many religious institutions that don't believe in divorce. They believe that you're going to get married one time, and you're going to work it through. Um, if you do get divorced, like the Catholic Church, you can be excommunicated for that. And like I say, I think it's more a religious thing. So, I mean, if you're involving religion, I guess you have to abide by their particular set of rules.
Well, going with religion and the complete opposite of that kind of, I know a church in town where the preacher would not marry people who wanted to get married because they lived together already. To me, it seems like the church would be like, "Oh, you're already living together. Yeah, let's go ahead and marry you," rather than saying, "No, I don't think that's a good idea."
I see what you're saying, and I feel like I can see both sides of this fence.
Mhm.
Um, you know, you've got the mindset nowadays. This is 2025. Okay, hey, you guys are living together. Y'all want to be married? Let's go ahead and get y'all married, so we can get past this whole living in sin thing. But then there's the ones who, and I don't mean to uh, upset a group of people by saying stuff like this, but there's these people who try to live biblically and say, well, you can't live in sin premarital. You can't live together and not be married. If you do, you're committing sin. If you're committing sin like that, then we don't want you in this church. We're not going to, marry you. We're not going to have all this garbage heathenism around us.
Mhm.
And I personally don't believe you can live biblically this day and age. Not not as much as a lot of people think they can. But if they're already living together, like I know in certain situations, maybe the male has gone to another country during his travels, found himself a woman in a country abroad, fell in love, and now has to go through the United States, I don't know, the visa, green card process, whatever it is, to bring her back here in order to marry her. Well, I mean, do we expect them to say, well, I have my house here, but since I bring her back from another country, she has to live in another house until we get married? I think that's kind of ridiculous. So
Mhm.
I guess it depends on the church you're in and the way you want to believe, I guess.
Yeah, I could see it. Well, if we let Jack and Sally get married when they were living together, old Joe and Sue over there might think, well, we can go ahead and live together too. And that's kind of setting a bad example in their eyes. So, yeah, I see it both ways too.
Sure. Like I said, it really depends on your church. Um, I know many churches, they may elect their pastor, minister, preacher, whatever they may call it. Some, I guess, are appointed. I'm not super well versed in all the different sects of religion, especially Christianity, excuse me. But if you have a leader of your church that says, this is the way we believe, and your congregation does not agree with that, well, I think it's up to you to take up those issues with the preacher, and he either changes as the leader of your church, or you find another leader who is more in line with the whole congregation. So moving forward and thinking about the issues with churches, one of the conversations I've had recently with somebody um, was that they don't believe you can go to heaven if you don't attend church. And it isn't something that I really ever thought of before,
Mhm.
but since that conversation came up, um, I don't feel like I'm on the same page as them.
Mhm.
Uh, I look at, Exodus chapter 20, verse 8 through, I think it's maybe 11, starting with, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor, do all thy work. 7th day is Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work. Thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle. So I guess the cow can't even work. nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. So any guest you have in your home. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, sea, and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh. So I get that it says on the seventh day you rest, but it doesn't say to me that you have to go to a church. It says
Mhm.
keep it holy, of course. Um, Going to a church, I think, is an individual choice, because you're not going to just walk into the first church you find and say, well, goodness, this is where I need to be. This is perfect. You might go to several different churches. You might go here, there, and just, this one doesn't really align with my thoughts, or, I'm not feeling it this one. And finally, maybe you do find one, maybe you don't.
Mhm.
So looking into it more, in the Bible, I found several different passages that support the importance of a church, but none that say you must go to one if you're going to go to heaven. There's many references to gathering, to worshiping together. One of the most prevalent is Matthew 18:20. It says, for where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there am I among them.
Mhm.
But it's not saying anything that you have to be a tangible structure, tabernacle, a temple, a building. So I can see the social aspect of going to a church. I can see the aspect of gathering with like-minded people who believe uh, fairly close to the same thing you believe. But I don't see anything anywhere in the Bible, and anybody can correct me, where it says you have to go to church or you're not going to heaven.
Now, the person you were talking with, did they differentiate between adults and children? Are they under the belief that children aren't gonna go to heaven if they don't go to church when they have no way to get there unless their parents take them?
There was no differentiation in the conversation,
Mhm.
but I think the assumption was that the children would grow up to become adults and be in the church. But, sometimes, unfortunately, we lose children at young ages. And if they
Mhm.
weren't members of the church, then that brings a good question. Are they not going to heaven?
Because I was, taught growing up, Jesus loves the little children of the world, so they would automatically be welcome in my eyes.
Sure. When I was young, I went to a church. I can't even tell you the name of it. It was down in Florida. And even as a very small child, I barely remember the services, but it was Sunday school for children. And, we had days where if you wanted to be saved, you could be saved as a child, even though you may not have fully understood what that meant.
Mhm.
So as a small child, yes, we all sin. We've all fallen short of the glory of God. It says right there in the Bible. Even children sin. This day and age especially. Good gracious. So these children who sin, if they have not made atonement, asked for forgiveness, and brought Jesus into their heart, even though God loves little children, are they now not going to heaven?
Well, since you obviously consider yourself of the religious persuasion, do you believe in evolution?
It's funny to me that you say that. Um, Religious persuasion, I guess you could take that meaning different things, but I do believe in some evolution. The
Mhm.
evolution of maybe our personalities, us as a whole. Do I believe we came from monkeys or fish or wherever else? I'm not sold on that, but I'm not a scientist either. So I have no proof one way or the other.
Well, one of the new science discoveries this past week was um, humans are the only ones with like the outer ear thing like we have. Nobody else has our ears, and they have used DNA sequencing to prove that evolved from fish gills. So our ears are our little fishy gills.
That's interesting. I can see the correlation there, but then if you bring in, Darwin's theory of evolution, you talk about one of the more popular theories was monkeys, chimpanzees, evolution from them. Did they evolve from these fish? And did we evolve from them? If so, why has evolution stopped? Why are there still fish? Why are there still monkeys and still humans?
Hmm.
So, I mean, did we evolve for a certain amount of time and that's all we got? And then what's there was there? So, if you're looking at the science aspect of it, there's always questions. Of course, there's questions in the religious aspect too. But
Hmm.
the answer is, just pick one, believe it or don't believe it, or go with however you want. That's that to me is why it's very important if you do decide to pick a church. You want to make sure that they align with your particular beliefs because unfortunately there are so many various ways to interpret one single book. And that's why we have different sects of even just a Christian religion. You got different groups of people who can read the same passage and say, well, I believe it this way. Well, I believe that this way. Well, I believe that this way. So I don't know. That's, get back to the main conversation. That's why I don't, it's not that I don't think churches are important. If somebody wants to go to a church and they believe it makes them a better person or they feel more comfortable there, they like the community aspect, the social aspect, by all means, go. Anything that helps you in your religion, helps you feel like you're doing better in life, I say go for it. With that, I think we've kind of covered the Bible verse of the day, probably several of them. You know, since Bobby's not here, I'm going to do his little strange laws. So I found a couple of them that are kind of interesting. Before I get into that, there's two sayings that I heard recently, and they both kind of tickled me. And I wanted to share them. The first one says, "You're not afraid of being alone in the dark. You're afraid of not being alone in the dark."
I agree with that 1000%.
Mm-hmm. And before I'd heard that, I had never really thought about that, but yeah, I guess that does make sense.
Yeah, my mom used to tell me, well, if it's dark enough you can't see them, then they can't see you. I'm like, no, I'm not taking that chance, mama.
I don't know. I'm an 80s baby. I've seen plenty of those old 80s horror movies, and the killers and monsters can see just fine in the dark.
Exactly.
So the second one was more of a question. It was kind of silly, but it kind of got me thinking too. So I guess I will pose it to you in a question form.
Okay.
Um, it's said, or at least I have heard, that say a box of crayons, all these colors, black and the white are not colors.
Right.
Right. I think we've pretty much all heard that. So why is a black and white television not in color if there are no
Because
colors to be seen?
say that again. Black and white are not colors. So why is a black and white TV not a color TV? Did you not just answer your own question there?
No, 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 no. I think I'm maybe I am delivering it wrong. But
Okay. So you're saying if it's a black and white TV and black and white aren't colors, how are we seeing anything?
right, maybe that's how I should have presented it. Yes,
Good question.
I've always heard that black was like the absence of color.
And white is all the colors, and that makes no sense. They need to be switched.
So black and white TVs, how could we see it?
Maybe it's just called a black and white TV, but it's really a shades of gray TV. A 50 Shades of Grey TV, if you will.
No, no, we don't. Mm-mm. No, we don't. I don't know. That was it was just a silly little question I'd heard and kind of got me thinking.
Well, one
Oh,
thing I found completely interesting was the Addams Family set, which was all, creepy and black and white and all that, was actually pink. Like the pink color transitioned better to the black and white filming than black and white. And I was like, that's nice to know that Morticia and Gomez were just chilling in a pink living room that whole time.
really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So the pinks maybe Well, I guess, since it was black and white TV then, they knew what colors to use for what shadings of black, white, or light colors.
And, like, the women's makeup, they would use, like, bright colors of greens and blues, and it would translate to look like, normal makeup and things like that.
Hmm, that's interesting. But, of course, when they went to color, they didn't have to worry about all that anymore. Getting away from that silly question, we will, talk about these couple of strange laws. There's just two of them that I looked up, and I actually heard one from somebody which got me digging deeper into it and got me to find the second one. But they're both out of Colorado. The first one is General Colorado State Law. Did you know it is illegal to throw a missile at a car?
Just throw it. Just with, like, toss it at the car.
Well, in that presentation, yeah, I mean, you're just assuming you're lobbing a missile, some kind of a, explosive warhead at a passing by vehicle.
I could see why that would be illegal.
Sure. But when we look deeper into it, it's Colorado General Statutes, I'm sorry, Colorado Revised Statutes, Section 18-9-116 says any person knowingly projects any missile at or against any vehicle or equipment designed for the transportation of persons or property other than a bicycle commits a civil infraction. And it goes on to say any person who knowingly projects any missile at or against a bicyclist commits a Class 2 misdemeanor. So you actually get more trouble if you shoot a missile or throw a missile at a bicyclist.
Well, I guess they have less protection from the vehicle, so they might get hurt more from said missile.
Perhaps. And the last part of it says, as used in this section, quotes here, missile means any object or substance.
Okay.
So it does clarify it, but the title of it's illegal to throw a missile at a vehicle is just kind of interesting when you see that.
Yeah, because you think if you hear a law, they had to have made that law because somebody did that thing that they made the law against. And I'm like, so who's just out here throwing missiles at poor people out in Colorado? But I guess if anything is considered a missile, that makes more sense.
Sure.
Like, don't throw your cup of coffee.
Right, but why would they use the term missile?
I guess so they know, anything from pebbles to nuclear warheads, they're all no-nos.
Hopefully there's not somebody in Colorado lobbing nuclear warheads at cars.
Or especially bicycles.
Right, you get more trouble for that. So the second one is out of Aspen, Colorado, and it quotes their municipal code section 15.04.210. Um, the title is, it is illegal to fire catapult at a building.
That makes sense too.
Well, I mean, I guess in the whole state, if you can't throw missiles, you probably shouldn't be able to fire catapults.
You can't throw it with your hand, you cannot use another machine to throw it either.
I guess not. But the wording of the law says it shall be unlawful for any person to throw any stone, get this, snowball, or other missile, or discharge any bow, blowgun, slingshot, gun, catapult, or other device upon or at any vehicle, building, or other public or private property, or upon or at any person, or in any public way or place which is public in nature.
No, no snowball fights on the courtyard.
Apparently in Aspen, Colorado, which I'm given to understand it snows quite a bit, you can't throw a snowball. It's
Mm-mm, that's a
interesting.
that's a big ski town, I believe. You always hear about people going to Aspen for ski trips and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. But I'm glad they put in or other objects because I'm like, they outruled the catapult. They did not say anything about a trebuchet, but
Mm-hmm. Sure.
then they tacked it on in that other column.
But when you said before that generally laws are made because it's happened, uh, something has happened in the past and they had to make a law making sure people don't do that. Um, covering this law particularly, stone, snowball, okay, probably rocks, snowballs, but going on to use that famous term missile, they continue with bow, blowgun, slingshot, gun, catapult. So are there people in Aspen using blowguns, slingshots, and catapults?
Apparently there are, at one point in time.
Seems a little excessive if you ask me. Uh, this is just very specific. Thought that was kind of a strange law to me.
Mhm.
May not be as strange as something that Bobby would have brought up, but it was interesting to me. It's still early in the morning, but Bobby said he's going to have an early morning wedding. That brought me to another question. When he and I were discussing his wedding, he said it was going to be early in the morning, around 9 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, wow.
I said, who in the world gets married at 9 o'clock in the morning?
Most weddings I've heard of normally take place afternoon.
Right. And I mentioned that to him. I think he even said that he kind of agreed with that. I'm not sure if it was the church that he's in that's deciding to have it this early, or if he's just like, hey, we need to get married in the morning, got to catch the ball game in the afternoon. That's just interesting. A 9 o'clock in the morning wedding. So won't be too long. He'll be a married man. I'll probably check in with him this afternoon.
Yeah, most brides I know would be like, no, 9 o'clock is not time for the makeup, the hair, the dress, and everything to be ready. But I guess if you're having a simple wedding where you don't care about all those things, why not? Wake up, breakfast, married, party the rest of the day.
Well, don't the brides pretty much have most of that done at least the day before? I mean, the dress is picked out well in advance. You've got that. So I imagine, it's up at the church on a hanger waiting. I don't know how long it takes to get into it. But don't they usually go get their hair and makeup done like the day before and then they almost sleep standing up so nothing gets messed up?
No, it's a before the wedding thing.
Oh, okay.
Nails, I'll give you nails. They could get the nails done the day before, but probably not any further back than that because you don't want to chip a nail before you get married.
Mm, right. Yeah. I mean, that is super important because I know everybody is staring at her nails. Hmm.
In fact, it's probably only going to be her when she looks back at the pictures and she's holding her bouquet and there's a big chunk out of that French manicure. She's not going to be happy.
Okay. I'll give you that one. But you're right. It's probably just going to be her. I don't think most people will notice it or even care, at least not men.
Exactly. That is one thing people will be like, why do you women get all dressed up? The men don't care. I'm like, we're not doing it for the men. We're doing it for ourselves and the other women that are going to see us while we're out.
Sure. I mean, I've long understood that a wedding is for the woman. It's her day. We're just supposed to be there. They can get all dolled up and gussied up. We just wear our little tuxedo, suit, whatever. We just be there on time, be sober, and say I do.
I'm glad you gave the be sober disclaimer. That's always good to hear.
um, Moving forward, I know there's a big to do. With only a few days left, there's a lot of people talking, especially on social media, about the impending TikTok ban,
Mhm.
which is supposed to take effect on January 19th of this
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
You know, there's you've got the incoming president, Donald Trump. He's trying to get the Supreme Court to hold off on the ban until after he is inaugurated. I'm not sure why. I don't know what he can do immediately as president to help that, but they decided to say, no, we're not going to wait. So the 19th is tentatively going to be banned, but they are still looking at the case. They may decide not to. It's up to the Supreme Court. I was kind of curious as to why they're really attacking TikTok so much. The news articles I read said that the government is claiming it is a national security threat. I just don't understand that. Why is that a national security threat, but the other social media platforms are not?
Because China owns TikTok and it's okay for us to check the box giving away all of our personal information to a locally owned app versus an overseas app?
Okay, so China, the parent company called ByteDance is Chinese. The company that currently, I don't know if I want to say the word owns, but at least operates TikTok in the United States is TikTok Incorporated, which I think is a subsidiary of ByteDance, the Chinese corporation. And the argument is saying that solely based on the Chinese parent company ownership, China could weaponize the app to prioritize certain content being showed or order ByteDance to turn over vast amounts of user data compiled on TikTok by United States users. And that would be a powerful tool for harassment, recruitment, and espionage. I'm not sure, maybe I'm just not familiar with it, what information it is that they could turn over to use against us that they just can't go on TikTok and look at right now.
Right.
I mean, is there people in the Pentagon running around making TikToks and you can see secrets behind them? Uh, what kind of information are you going to get, from people doing these silly dances or challenges, or maybe showing themselves at work or whatever else? What kind of information are we looking at?
Well, I had heard that most government buildings have already banned TikTok in them already. So, like, if you're so and so working at the Pentagon, you can do whatever you want when you get home, but you cannot, absolutely cannot open TikTok and film anything while you're in, those buildings. So, of course, just because they say don't do it doesn't mean somebody's not.
Sure, but that makes sense. I mean, especially someplace like the Pentagon or anywhere where there may be, secret government files or what have you. I couldn't imagine any social media platform being open and used in those situations. But like you said, just because they said don't doesn't mean they're not.
I mean, I do feel bad for content creators that are on there if it does go down, because I've heard a couple different scenarios like A, it's just going to completely go away right then, right there, it's gone. Or B, it's still going to be there. It's just not going to be able to be downloaded like Flappy Bird and no updates or new filters or anything like that. But, these people have spent years collecting millions of followers and use it as, their source of income. And, I wish I could do that, good for them. But then again, like, do you remember Vine and how popular Vine was? And then boom, it just went away and everybody just moved on from that and found a new one.
That's true. That's true. I never really looked into why Vine went away. I figured it was just replaced by another, like a TikTok or something. But I know there's already some TikTok alternatives out there. I'm not going to mention them. I'm not trying to promote or anything, but there are already at least 2 or 3 that I have seen people going ahead and switching to that are not exactly like TikTok, but very close. You say a lot of people use it and they're going to be suffering. There's approximately 170 million Americans that use this app.
Wow.
I didn't think it was that many, but good gracious, that's a lot. The arguments from TikTok is that it's protected by First Amendment free speech. The Supreme Court is really not feeling it. If you look up the articles, I think it was Justice Clarence Thomas said something to the effect of, and what speech does TikTok have? So why do they have free speech? And especially if it's owned by a Chinese corporation, they are not privy to American rights. I agree with that. So, I mean, it could really still go either way, but I think it's probably leaning more towards shutting down or getting banned on the 19th.
You said 170 million Americans?
That was a number that I saw, yes.
That is about half of our population. So that, that really is a lot of people.
I didn't realize it was that high, but yes, it is.
Well,
And
in my mind, we have more than 340 million people living in America, but apparently we don't. That's it.
seems to me like we'd have just that many in New York City.
Right?
But you were mentioning the options of whether it's going to just be gone completely or stop updates. So looking at the law, the bill that they are trying to figure out if it's going to pass or not, it does not say banning as far as it's banned now, it's absolutely gone. If you use it, you're going to jail. All it says is there's no more availability to download it from the Apple App Store or Google Play Store. And they can't force because of censorship rules, but they will strongly urge internet service providers to no longer service or maintain the apps. So you're not going to go to jail if you still have it, but you're not going to get updates. And they say, if it's on your phone before the 19th, you could potentially still use it, still post, still watch, but with no updates to the software, firmware, whatever, eventually it will become so buggy that it's unusable over
Mhm.
time. I don't know how long that would take, but even though there wouldn't be any updates, there are certain ways to get around the ban. You could still use the browser-based TikTok on a PC because the ban is only for the app. Even though TikTok was designed for app, you can go on the internet and pull it up on your browser. So there is that, but that still will not have updates either. You could use a VPN to download it. There were other issues with some other social media platforms, and when they had temporary loss of being able to be downloaded, VPNs were used and the apps were still downloaded. So you could do that and still download it. But again, it's still not going to have updates, even if you use a VPN. So TikTok Incorporated, though, said, if a ban comes, we're just going to shut down.
Mhm.
So they're just going to cut it off from there. I personally think it's going to happen, going to go down on the 19th, and you're just going to have to move to another platform if that's what you like. So I would hope that everybody's preparing for that if that is their sole income. And in other fun news,
Hmm.
I try not to point this podcast one way or the other politically. Of course, we know my stance.
Uh-oh.
Yes, we know my stance. I am more conservative. However, I do have some liberal views on certain things. So I kind of consider myself more middle of the road. But something that I thought was interesting has been in the news, oh God, so much. Of course, is Donald Trump and his convictions. The whole Stormy Daniels hush money case.
Mhm.
And it's gone back and forth and had round and round and round. They finally have convicted him. The jury found him guilty on, what was it, 34 counts, I believe it was, falsifying records. And, everybody cries, well, look, now he's a convicted felon. Well, as it were, he is not at that point. Um, Law stating that you must be sentenced to be a convicted felon. Why? I don't know, but that's just how it reads. You can have a conviction all day long, but until you receive the sentence, you are not a convicted felon.
I guess there's always a chance you could appeal it and then not be convicted of it, and therefore I get it. That makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, maybe. So, everybody was saying, well, you're voting for a convicted felon, you're going to get a convicted felon in the White House, blah blah blah. Um, Maybe unbeknownst to them, the Constitution has nothing in there about that. So a convicted felon can absolutely be the president. Technically, he could run the country from inside a prison cell if he wanted to. But the courts that were seeing or overseeing the case said, well, you know what? We're not going to wait until he's again president because there's the whole thing about convicting a sitting president. I guess it just doesn't happen. So they said, we're going to go ahead and convict him or do the sentencing rather now. And that was on Friday the 10th. he was sentenced, and some people on some side of the aisle, I'm not necessarily mentioning which side, but it rhymes with left, um, were happy that he was going to be sentenced, but then got very unhappy when he got his sentence. So the sentence that he got for 34 counts of felonious fraud was an unconditional discharge. So he serves no jail time, has no probation, no fine. Basically, they said, there is no penalty, but you are now a convicted felon. So I think the whole purpose was to just make him look bad, in my personal opinion, and make him a convicted felon, which does not stop the inauguration, does not stop his presidency, doesn't stop anything other than technically him owning a firearm, but he's got
I
enough
mean,
security. I don't think he needs to worry about that.
d doesn't that also stop him from visiting countries that do not allow felons in?
Um, I think it's going to be up to those particular countries. Do they stop the felon from entering or allow the president to enter?
Pick and choose, right?
Right. I mean, of course, President Trump maintains his innocence and says that they will be appealing this decision. So if they appeal and they overturn it, then obviously he will not be a convicted felon. But I have no idea how long that's going to take, if he can even do that while he's in the office, if he has to wait till afterwards. Lord only knows. But the entire case, in my mind, was just odd. The fact that, they want to bring up during his first presidential run that Stormy Daniels, an adult entertainment actress, comes forward saying she had an affair with him. But all these years of his wealth and notoriety, you only come forward when he's running for president. Things like that just don't sit well with me. It's not completely believable. And the other fact that there was, from what I understand, no real tangible evidence of wrongdoing. There were a few recordings, one notable of Donald Trump saying, well, we've got to pay him something, talking about I think one of his lawyers who allegedly was paying Stormy to keep quiet. Um, there were payments made, checks signed by Donald Trump, but they were to his legal team. And the lawyers say, well, I didn't do that much work for him during this amount of time that I was being paid. So I don't know, just back and forth. I'm not a lawyer. I didn't follow it 100%, so I'm not going to sit here and say whether he did or did not. But he was convicted on Friday of 34 counts of fraud and got absolutely nothing but a conviction. So I think there were a lot of people on the left side of the aisle very upset about that, and the right side too. So I'm sure they didn't want him convicted or being a convicted felon. But we know that's everybody's favorite president.
Totally. Um, was he impeached? Was Trump impeached over this or no?
He was impeached. I believe it was twice. I don't 100% know if it was over this particular situation or if it was another one. But yes, he was impeached, but not removed.
Of course.
And it feels like since President Clinton went through
Uh-huh.
his impeachment and he wasn't removed, um, it feels like it just kind of snowballed since then. It's any time a president does something the other side just doesn't like, they just want to yell, impeach, impeach. And to me, that's just getting old. We've had presidents as long as this country's been around, and half of the people are not going to like what you do. It's just
Right.
the way it goes because we have a two-party system. One party's going to stand every time you say something, the other party sits. They just don't like it. They're just the way they are. But yelling impeach every time a president does something is ridiculous. Um, Now, if it is unlawful, if it is enough that they should not hold the office of presidency and not run this country or represent this country, sure, by all means, go through the process, impeach them, remove them. But don't impeach them just to say they were impeached and not remove them.
Right.
It, to me, that's like getting a conviction with no jail time, fine, or anything else. It's just silly. Well, what have you really done other than just put that on their record? And it doesn't necessarily hurt him. I mean, he's twice impeached. He's going to be president again. Now he's a convicted felon. He's going to be president again. What have you really done other than just put something on paper? I mean, he's still very, very rich, still owns many companies, still. I mean, what have you really stopped by impeaching him or convicting him? It doesn't seem like they've done much of anything. Maybe I don't see something. Maybe I'm missing something. But if anybody out there knows any more about it and wishes to discuss it, come onto the Facebook, throw something on there, throw something on Discord. I'll be happy to talk with anybody about it. Come on the show. I'll talk to you about it. Doesn't matter to me. I'm not so far gone that I can't be educated myself.
Well, I do think if you can be president if you're a convicted felon, they need to relook at some of the other jobs that say no, you can't. It's like, why can you rule the country, but you can't work at, the hardware store down the road?
Sure, sure. Well, this isn't a new thing that you could be president as a convicted felon. Again, it's part of the Constitution. It says nothing about that. It's
Well,
always been in place. We've just never had to deal with it.
did we have the label felon back when they wrote the Constitution? I don't think so. I don't know, but I don't think so.
I'm going to guess probably not. I don't think felon, misdemeanor, all that stuff was thrown around a whole lot. I think it was pretty much guilty or not guilty or wit.
Right, there you go.
So I don't think, and I would have to ask somebody in constitutional law or look up Constitution word for word in every amendment myself. I don't think it specifically says a felon can be a president. I just don't think it has anything saying that they can't.
Mhm.
So if there's nothing there saying they can't, then how do you stop them? But bringing up your point of other jobs, say in the private sector or even the public sector, that are not government related, not presidential, they say right there on the application, have you ever been convicted of felony? Yes or no? But they also,
True, but that's you doing it, not asking them.
yeah, yeah, they may not want to tell you. They might be embarrassed. Um, they may want to put it behind them. I don't know. Maybe they just want to ignore it completely and pretend they never had it. But my thought is, if it's so readily available and easy to find out, why not just tell them?
That reminds me of one of those people they met on a dating app, and he was like, "By the way, don't Google me, you might find out I'm a murderer." And she's like, "Ha ha ha," and then she Googled him and found out he was a murderer. Like, well, at least he was kinda upfront at the beginning. But yeah, I have a tendency to anybody who tries to talk to me, it's like, "Okay, let's, tap, 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 find out what we know about you on the World Wide Web."
Yeah. This day and age with information so readily available, it's very difficult to hide much of anything. It doesn't take much to find out a whole lot about somebody.
Do you remember, um, a few years ago, there was an orca whale out in the Pacific who had a baby, and the baby passed away, but yet she ended up, carrying it for over thousands of miles?
I
Right.
don't personally remember that story, but I do know the story you're about to reference. I've seen that in the news recently, but go ahead.
That she recently had another one, and it passed away a few days ago, and now she's carrying it around too.
Right, right.
Now, she does have an older one preceding the first calf that passed away, and she has one living in between the 2. But, when I read the article, it says nearly 70% of their pregnancies or birth end tragically. And I was like, that's a lot, and we don't really know why, and I feel so bad for her because, that just makes they have feelings. Why else is she going to do it? and they were worried that it's going to affect her because she can't focus on eating and surviving herself, but yet they said and what they've been able to notice is the other members of the pod are helping her. They will take over carrying the baby while she eats or bring her food. And it just I know you're not supposed to humanize animals, but it just makes them seem more like us than we would normally think.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying there. Are they more like us or are we more like them? I mean, you could really go either way. If we look at it, I mean, you think maybe animals don't have feelings, but I'm sure they do. I'm sure in each one of the different species of animals in the kingdom, there are different ways that they might mourn or grieve or have different feelings. And it's interesting to me that this particular orca is doing this. I wonder if this is something that's common among orcas or other whales, that they carry their dead with them like that. Is this just the way they mourn? Is it their grieving process, their sort of funeral?
It is. She has just made the news because she's doing it a lot longer than what the other whales have been observed doing.
So, like, what's the normal amount of time they do this?
I'm not sure exactly. Um, they're hard to keep track of because a lot of times I guess the birthing time correlates with them moving further out in the ocean where we can't keep track of them as much. But I did read that, a lot of them do it, just she did it way, way longer than normal.
Right. Well, maybe she's more sad about it. I don't know. I saw that news article as well, and I thought it was kind of interesting. I didn't know this was something that they did. So, at the end of her, I guess, grieving period, when she's done carrying the baby, what happens then? Does she just let it go and it falls into the bottom of the ocean?
That would be my assumption, and, I mean, I hate to say it because, decomposition, circle of life, is that what makes her finally let go? Is it attracting scavenger animals from the ocean, and that's why she lets it go? Or does she just, "Okay, I'm moving on?" There's so many different things it could be, and you can't really ask her.
True, true. That is interesting. Maybe that's something that we could kind of follow and look into. Maybe report on the updates along the way or whenever she's done.
Yeah, because I was so happy for her. I was like, "Oh, she had another baby. It's been spotted swimming beside her." And then I believe, January 5th, they noticed her carrying it. So I'm like, "Oh, poor baby."
But you said she has other babies that are alive.
She has one that's 14 years old and one that was born in 2020, so about 5.
Okay, that's interesting. You said 70% of their births end up in tragedy.
Yep.
Wow, that's a high number. I wonder why so many. All right, well, with that, I think we'll bring this show to a close. So far, this is probably one of our longer shows. I'm glad you guys stopped in today and are listening. And feel free to join us on Discord, Facebook. We do have a YouTube set up as well. On the Facebook page, we have the links to everything. And I will do my best to add those links in the show notes here. Thank you guys for joining us. And we look forward to having you guys back. And I want to thank Michelle for joining us today, too. It was a real pleasure having you.
Thank you for letting me be here.
All right. Everybody be blessed and have a great weekend.